Hey friends, welcome to the library or welcome back to the library. I have with me today author Sally Jenkins. I'm really excited to be chatting with you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started writing and kind of your journey through that?
Yeah, it started a long time ago, actually, probably about 25 years ago, when I was at home with small children. And I realised that a lot of the women's magazines would actually pay you if you wrote them a letter and they printed it on their letters page.
Yeah.
So I had a go at that, and I got a check in the post, and I saw my name in print, and it all felt very exciting and addictive. So I carried on, and then I decided I was going to do a creative writing correspondence course, which taught me how to write articles for magazines. So I moved into that, again, using my own experience as a new mum. I wrote articles about potty training and when we had to have the class teddy bear home from school, things like that. Then I thought, let's have a go at fiction. And I was a little bit nervous about spending time writing a whole novel because I thought probably nobody would want to read it and it would be a waste of time. So I started on short stories for the women's magazines, and that was quite a hard market to crack, but I did get into it eventually. And then when I told people I was a writer, they didn't quite take me seriously because I hadn't written a novel.
Yeah.
So I had a go at writing a novel, just a pure romance novel. And I joined the Romantic Novelists Association in the UK, where I live, because they offer a critique on manuscripts. So I wrote the novel, I sent them the manuscript, and they were quite scathing about it. They said it wasn't very good, and they suggested I stay with the short stories. And that quite knocked my confidence, so I put the novel away and I went back to just writing short pieces. But eventually I plucked up the courage and I wrote another novel. This time I went in the sort of psychological fiction type direction, and that one won a small competition and ended up being,
Yay.
yeah, I was really chuffed. And it ended up being published on Kindle and in paperback. So I wrote another one, and that came out as well. So that was two psychological thrillers.
Mhm.
And then I moved on to what I'm writing now, which is more emotional women's fiction with an uplifting feeling to it. So it should leave the reader feeling hopeful at the end of it. So that's how I got from writing letters all the way to being a novelist.
Wow, that's quite a journey to have gone through. Um, that leads me down a different direction with the start of my questions.
All right,
Do
okay.
you feel like that rejection had a massive impact on your writing style or maybe the direction you chose to go with that second novel?
Yeah, it put me off writing romance,
Mm-hmm.
but well, not exactly put me off romance. I think one of the main criticisms in that first novel was that I had characters who were quite young,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a whole generation younger than what I was when I wrote it. And the feeling was that I didn't really know how young people lived now. So the sort of the language they used, because everything had moved on since I was in my 20s, because I was probably 40 plus by the time I wrote that. And I'd grown up in a different world where we didn't have mobile phones and we didn't
Yeah.
perhaps have the same lifestyle. And I hadn't managed to capture the lifestyle of the current young people. And I think that did influence me greatly, so that the novels that I'm writing now, the main characters tend to be probably 50 plus, because I know that I can write them with authenticity rather than trying to write a 25-year-old person who's grown up in a completely different world to what I did. So I think
Yeah.
that's how it influenced me greatly in my writing. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like the character inspirations have a lot to do with that as well?
Yeah. It does. And I think most writers will probably deny that their characters are autobiographical in any way. But I think, I mean, I don't particularly set out to write about me because I'm writing fiction.
Right.
But when my first emotionally uplifting book, Little Museum of Hope, was published, and my best friend from the school days read it, and she sent me an email and she said that she saw me in so many of the things that happened in that book, even though I hadn't set out to put them in. She said she could tell why I'd got that idea or why I'd created that character. So I think unconsciously I was taking myself as inspiration or the jumping off point for the story, even though I didn't intend to do that.
Yeah, and rightfully so. I feel like it's another version of therapy in some way, a way to express what you've been through, and maybe even some goals that you eventually want to accomplish or set out to accomplish in the beginning, and things shifted and you didn't quite land where you originally thought you were.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, actually, that maybe our own frustrated ambitions come out in the characters that we create. I think that's a very good point, Natalie. Yeah.
Do you feel like you would ever one day try to go back to that romance?
No, I don't think I could. I think I would cringe probably. I wouldn't even reread it. I think I would just sit there and cringe and think, how could I possibly have dared to even send this in for a critique? You know, I think, no, I wouldn't revisit it at all.
And you would think that we were our own worst critics when it comes to things like that, because you're kind of putting yourself out there in that situation. But it's hard. I think sometimes it's even harder to hear it from others than it is for you to be self-criticizing.
Yeah. I mean, criticism is something, and rejection, that writers have to get used to. And I think in the early days, it really hurts, which is maybe why I took the criticism of that novel quite personally. But as I've gone on in my writing career, I've learned that criticism in a way is good as long as it's constructive. So if it says, as that did, you haven't captured the character, that was actually helpful for me. But it's no good if somebody just says to you, well, that's rubbish, because it doesn't help you at all. But I think we grow a thicker skin as we go through this business, and we learn that, okay, when somebody reads a novel or a short story or whatever it is, they read it subjectively. So everybody has a different opinion about it. And because one person doesn't like it, doesn't necessarily mean it's total rubbish. I run a book group at my library, and whenever we read a book, there's always somebody who thinks it's fantastic, it's the best book she's ever read, but you'll also get somebody who says, well, I couldn't finish it, it was so bad, I couldn't finish it. So I understand now that there's quite a range of opinions about any one book.
Yeah, I feel like the saying beauty is in the eye of the beholder is really fitting in that situation. It takes all kinds of kind to go around situation. It's how we make the world. I feel like it evens out that way.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Have you ever wanted to try something other, like branch out again, aside from the psychological thriller?
So yeah, I started off with the psychological thrillers because that is what I like to read. And it was also, when I was doing that, it was quite a popular genre. You know, there was a lot of it around. It was sort of around the time of Girl on the Train and all those sort of things coming out. And I think that's why I instinctively went in that direction. But I think I then switched because the market seemed to be flooded. There was a lot of books like that, and to think up a different sort of a twist is quite difficult. Well, for me, it was quite difficult, and that's why I started going down a different route to write now the emotional women's fiction, and also because I had a particular idea that would suit women's fiction, and I started going down that route. Yeah.
And we just has there ever been something like a fantasy or an adventure that you just have been drawn to, like maybe one day you'll attempt?
There is one book that I would like to get published, which has a fantasy element to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I did send it to my current publisher, but they said that type of genre didn't fit their list or their readers. Mm-hmm. And that is a book that is partly set in real life, in the contemporary world, and partly set in what I've called Heaven's Lobby, which is somewhere that I've invented that you go to just after death, but before you go into heaven properly.
Okay.
So it's a little bit out of the ordinary. But I don't know whether it will ever see the light of day. But in my head, I would quite like it to be published. I've even got a vision of the cover and potentially 2 more books that would create a series. But it's a case of finding a publisher or deciding to do it myself independently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's one of my new favorite questions to ask people. I'm like, has there ever been anything that you wanted to like attempt, but you haven't quite got there? Because everybody's like, well, yeah, there's actually this one. And I'm like, yay, tell us about it. Maybe somebody will encourage you.
Yeah, I think the thing about writing is you are very much told that you need to write for the market, because there's no point writing a book that nobody wants to read. But secretly in your head, you may have an idea that doesn't actually fit into, a crime or a horror. It sort of perhaps crosses over with more than one genre, and publishers find it difficult to market those for whatever reason. And so they're not readily acceptable, even though it may be great writing.
Yeah. I think the hookup there with publishers is they have a set marketing ability. And when you're not as familiar as the writer with the story and you have a sort of a detachment, because it's one of those, because it cannot fit in this little box that we want it to go in, we're not going to attempt. Whereas with the author, they're just like, well, maybe it's not a box, maybe it's a triangle, or maybe it's a hexagon, or, and they're just like, well, it would not be that hard because, for example, like when you have retellings, like a Peter Pan retelling or a Beauty and the Beast retelling, they almost always end up in some sort of dark romance or like dark fantasy situation. But in reality, they're technically both, because it is a classic retelling of a fantasy story that you have made into your own, which could also be sci-fi or romance or, a touch of contemporary in the same situation. It's an amalgamation of things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think it's often attractive to write something that is an amalgamation. Mm-hmm. But as you say, it might be a rectangle or a circle and it doesn't fit in that square box that publishers can market to their existing readers. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think they also don't think about those things that may not fit in their box for their existing readers can bring in the side readers, because there are plenty of people who maybe they're not an avid reader and they pick up a book every once in a while if it catches their eye, but that could be the one that turns them into an avid reader.
Yeah, exactly.
And you never know when those, because there are plenty of people just since COVID-19 who have started reading because of, It Ends With Us or something else like Harley LaRoe went viral on TikTok with a monster romance, and that is now an even more massive category than it already was. And there's just really no telling with the way that our world circles. I mean, so many people buy online and it takes one post to get there.
Yeah. I mean, I think social media probably has changed the book selling landscape.
For sure.
I mean, I haven't got into TikTok, but I am assured that Book Talk is a great thing. And, it can sell books, like, from different types of genre that we're not familiar with. So, yeah, I think that does change book marketing.
I'm young and I still am not a huge fan of TikTok. And it probably has a lot to do with how much other social media platforms have changed their algorithms since they came around. Just because it's no longer like really curated to go to the people who you follow and that follow you. It's more of just like we put together whatever we want situation. And that can be very frustrating if you are not type A and look like what social media wants you to look like.
Ah, right. Yes.
Mm-hmm. If you do not have like the conventionally attractive cheekbones and you're not dancing in your videos or XYZ, they just don't push it as much.
Yeah, maybe I won't go on TikTok.
Yeah, I find between the different types of social medias that the book community has kind of like taken over little corners of, Facebook groups are some of my favorite. Just because you get a lot of interaction, a lot of people who want to come in and talk about books, and they'll happily give you recommendations. I mean, it's really easy to run up on a post somebody made and it has like hundreds of comments and it's just like, oh, this book sounds like this, or if you like this one, try this one. And it's so easy to expand from there. Instagram is fun because the pictures are really cute and I get to see what other people are reading. So I get to get a feel for what the cover looks like, and maybe even follow authors who have like the tropes posted or something. But it can be very much if your feed does not look like something specific, you're not in the click. Is how it feels.
Right. Yeah. I must admit, I find Facebook a lot easier than Instagram. Because Instagram, I feel the need that you've got to have some sort of special picture or photo that you can post, whereas Facebook can be more text-based. They're not expecting wonderful pictures and so on. It's enough just to chat, as it were.
Yeah. I think that's probably just, I like conversation anyways. So I find myself drawn to Facebook. Threads has become that as well. The connected to, it's almost like Twitter, but it's not. Twitter is the dirty cousin that no one wants to acknowledge.
That does seem to have been what's happened. Yeah. I mean, I did used to like Twitter. I'm not on there as much now, and I have joined Threads, and that does seem more of a gentle community. Yeah.
And I'm starting to see more and more of that connection coming back, where we're having actual conversation and readers are standing up for their authors and authors are backing some of their readers who are acting appropriately. If you're not acting appropriately, I'm not claiming you. I want a safe space, but I do really enjoy that there are so many authors who want that connection and that community with their readers.
Yeah, I think actually it's very important for writers to connect with their readers and interact, because it's lovely to have a relationship, because writing is such a lonely activity. And sometimes you think, why on earth am I doing this? Why am I spending all this time alone at my computer? So to actually then get feedback from readers, or to be able to just chat to them and say, you know, well, what did you like about this book? It's really nice, actually. It seems to make it all worthwhile, because very few writers make much money out of selling books. It's very difficult to earn a living. And if you're not actually getting any financial reward, it's lovely to get the personal reward of just being in contact with people who enjoy reading and books as much as we do, because all writers are readers themselves, and we just love being part of that book community.
Yeah. And I think there's part of that too. Something that one of my bosses said not too long ago is we forget that people that we look up to, authors, actors, you know, playwrights, they're put on a pedestal as if they're unreachable, when in reality they're human just like we are. And it's one of those, like, people forget that, not necessarily that you're human, because it's something that we can see, but that your daily things, like you need sleep too, you need to eat too, you need to shower too, you know, you need communication too, those sort of things. Like we cherish you as if you're like a statue in our gallery of some sort, that we can just come by and say hello and then leave and let you sit on a shelf somewhere and look pretty.
No, you're right. We are human like anybody else, and humans need humans. They need social interaction, and also for writers, a lot of our ideas and inspiration comes unconsciously, perhaps, from our interactions with other people. I mean, that's not to say that I'm now going to go away and write a book about a podcaster called Natalie who gets murdered in her bed or something, but it's just that we might take a little bit from each person. It may just be a manner of speaking, or with the way you shrug your shoulders, or whatever it is. And we put all of that into a composite character that's made up of, lots of conversations that we might have had. So meeting other people, as well as satisfying that need to be social, also feeds our artistic bent as well, by giving us inspiration.
Yeah. So with your journey that you've gone into with your publisher, do they still allow you to use like ARC teams, or maybe a street team of some sort on your own? Or do they take care of that for you?
Regarding ARCs, they generally take care of that. They have a list of regular ARC readers, and every time a new book comes out from one of the publisher's authors, they send an email out, who's interested in this book, this is the synopsis, this is what it's like, and people then would just take the books that are the type that would interest them. I don't have a street team as such, but anybody who wants to shout about my books, I would be very, very grateful.
I've had quite a few authors recently say that either they didn't have one, or they wanted one, but they didn't know how to get into it. And then there are a lot of readers that I've recently started connecting with through Discord, which, if anybody doesn't know what Discord is like a massive chat room that has little sections of its own. It's like going to a conference and having a bunch of different little rooms to chat about different things. And so I started connecting with a lot of people throughout the continental US and a few from overseas as well. And a lot of people either are afraid to get in touch with an author or a publisher or a business that has like author services for ARCs and things, or they just don't know how. Like, they have no idea that those things exist. And I wonder, like, how the publishers find the readers that they trust to do their ARC reading, because there are a lot of individual authors who publish on their own that just like post on Threads or Instagram and are just like, hey, this book's coming out. If you want to read an early copy, just fill out this form. But I don't know that I've ever seen that for a publisher.
Yeah, I don't know, actually. That's a very good point, Natalie. I don't know how they get the list that they email out to. I mean, a lot of publishers use NetGalley, and it's, I mean, I presume you know about, you can join NetGalley for free and request whatever book takes your fancy. I don't think you are guaranteed to get an ARC. I think some of the bigger authors, they do vet the people that they will send copies to, but some of the smaller publishers and authors will just let anybody have an advance copy. My own publisher, Joffy Books, I'm published by their imprint Chocolate. I think you could probably email them and say, please, can you add me to your list? I like this type of book, and let them know that you exist. And if you have a blog or anything where you're going to post reviews, let them know. And they may well say, yeah, okay, we'll put you on our list.
Yeah. I feel like that's with a lot of, not that the younger generations don't think about these things, but I don't think that it was openly communicated that you can just email a business at any point, or that you can just send them a letter at any point, because that is no longer how the majority of communication works. Like, yes, email happens, but so much more so that like businesses are looking for things and they ask for certain things, like they make some sort of statement or post instead of just taking requests from individuals.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. But I suppose there's nothing lost by asking, is there? You've got nothing to lose by saying, do you need any more readers?
Yeah, for sure. So we, obviously you're a reader. You already made that very clear. Do you read at the same time that you're writing a story?
I do, because I've usually always working on some sort of a book, whether it's a first draft or an edit or whatever. So I couldn't just stop reading fully. So yeah, I do always have a book on the go, but I tend to only read at night, just as I'm, for half an hour or so before I go to sleep, just to sort of unwind a little bit. But yeah, I do always have a book on the go.
I can't blame you. I have a book, whether it's in Kindle has been an amazing thing, whether it is a paperback or it is my Kindle or the Kindle app on my phone. And I also use like Libby for local libraries and Audible for, I always have something. I was at the store yesterday and my husband went to go get some food for us to eat at the moment because it was late in the evening, and he came back to me and sat down next to me while he was waiting on them to prepare our food. And he looked over at me and he goes, "Are you reading right now?" And I had pulled my Kindle out of my purse and I was like, "Yes, I am. There is nothing else for me to do except for sit here. So why would I not take advantage of this time?" And he was just like, "I should have known." It's like, I don't go anywhere without it.
No, good for you. Make the most of any free time that you get. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So is your favorite genre the same as what you write? Like, do you read the same exact genre or do you dabble elsewhere?
I read quite a range of different genres, actually. I mentioned that I run a book group, so I have to choose books for them that go across genres. So one month it might be some sort of classic novel, then we might have crime, and then we might have a horror. So that's quite wide. For my own reading, I also read different things. I'm currently reading the latest Robert Galbraith detective novel with Cormorant Strike in it. They're great big thick doorstep books. And I'm finding that actually, I can't wait until I can go to bed and read it for half an hour because I'm really enjoying it. I think I like the mixture of the crime that they have to solve, but also the sort of on-off or will they, won't they love story between Cormoran Strike and his assistant Robin, because they seem to get nearly together and then they're apart again, and I quite like that. So that is a mixture of genres really, because you've got sort of a little bit of a love story and then the crime thing, which is the main bit. So I'm enjoying that book at the moment.
Is that your favorite genre to read, like the crime thriller with romance undertones?
I suppose it is. Yeah. I do like that. I also enjoyed the Seven Sisters series by Lucinda Reily. I don't know if you know that. So those books are dual timeline. So you've got half of it happening in the present day and half of it a historical. And I quite like that because I felt when I was reading the historical bit, I was actually learning something. But again, you've usually got a little bit of a romance running through there as well. So I think I'm not a great fan of boy meets girl, there's a problem, they fall out, they get back together, sort of straightforward romances. I like there to be another story running alongside it as well, which is what I try and do in my own books. So there is always some element of a relationship in there, but there's also some other thing that the main characters are doing or learning or journeying along.
Yeah. So when you're looking, because you said you don't like that back and forth, when you're looking at your own stories and you're trying to sort out kind of where it's going, do you plot in whole, or are you kind of like a pantser / quilter where you like put them together after?
I do plan. So before I start writing, I try and sort of map out all the sort of the chapters, and I have these characters in my head, and then I start writing. And the problem I have is that I start off fine. Yeah, that's all great. It's doing what I thought. But then I get to a point where actually I think, well, it would be a better idea if instead of doing what I'd planned, they went off and did this other thing instead. So I go off and do this other thing, and then I realize that the rest of the plan doesn't work. And so I sometimes write myself into a corner and I've got to find a way out of it. I really wish I could be one of these people who plan a novel and stick to the plan, because I think that must be such a quick way to write a book instead of planning it and then ignoring the plan for most of the time. So I really need to get better at having a good plan in the first place so that I stick to it.
Well, you're not the only one. There are plenty of people. There are some that I know that don't even plan at all. And they're just like, I got a piece of this story that came to me while I was driving or while I was doing the dishes or sleeping. I got it to me in a dream. They're just like, and I started writing and the characters started just kind of doing whatever they wanted. And I was like, all right, if it works for you.
Yep.
I'm like, whatever works for all of us. I can't. I'm not going to knock it. So my next question is going to be, I asked this to someone else, so I want to ask it for you too. Do you feel like reviews are for readers or for the authors?
Oh,
I want an author point of view because I'm like on the fence.
Yeah, that's quite a difficult question, actually. It's not something I've thought about before. I think when somebody writes a review and posts it on Amazon or Goodreads or wherever they post it, I think they're posting it for other readers, aren't they? To say, well, if you like this sort of a book, you'll like this, or maybe they're even warning people off saying, well, this book doesn't do what it says. It's it's not very good. But I think as authors, when we look at those reviews, we take them to heart, and we think they are for us. Because again, it's a way of readers interacting with authors. If you leave a review somewhere public, then an author is likely to see it, because I know a lot of authors say they don't read their reviews, but I don't see how you can resist the temptation not to have a look and see if you've got any reviews, and are they good or are they bad. So I think probably readers write the review as advice for other readers deciding what book to read. But I think as authors, we take them as little messages to us as well, about how our books are going down with the general public.
I do agree. I think that there is this very peculiar line that we walk when we put up reviews, especially in a public setting like what you were saying. On social media, it is one of those, and I was just talking to another reader earlier today, and I told her, I was like, I feel like when you go to put up a review on your social media, I personally tend to leave off the star aspect of it, because one, I don't feel that the star aspect is accurately received for Amazon or Goodreads. One, it's not quite fair. And two, I may have rated it a certain way. Like, I may have given it 4 stars, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there were sections of it that weren't well written or that I didn't like, or it just may not be something that I remember or that I enjoyed as much as something else. And when I'm telling you on social media what I enjoyed about it, I am trying to convince you to go read it for yourself, to take that journey yourself. And I want to, well, one, most of the time, if they end up on my social media, it's because they left a massive impact on me in some way. Like, I can't stop thinking about it, or I was emotionally distraught, because that happens regularly. Somebody left me on a cliffhanger. But I don't feel like star ratings are really all that accurately depicting of a story. And that is mainly because there are plenty of people who could have read a story and gave it 3 stars and said it was great, it was well thought out, it was well written, something was just missing for me. And that doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't a good story at all, but Amazon is not going to view that and what was said the same as 5 stars. And somebody could easily say that's someone else's, like, it just does the weight of it. Like, I don't think that 3 stars is bad. Like, it maybe wasn't the absolute best thing I've ever read. It just wasn't my favorite, but it also wasn't the worst either, because there are plenty of things that I have read that felt like they were written by someone who was in their preteens. Like, it was just missing information, details. It was not edited very well. And now I can look at that objectively and go, okay, maybe they just need help, someone editing for sentence structure and grammar and spelling errors. And there are plenty of authors who have those issues regularly. It's very easy to type on a computer and have spelling errors and things. But then there are also people who rate stories 1 or 2 stars that they enjoyed because they had small grammatical errors or spelling errors or something. And I'm just like, there is not a general consensus as to what equates what star range.
I think you're spot on there, actually, because for me, to give 5 stars to a book, it has to be really stand out, something that will stay in my mind. So I don't like to give out a lot of 5-star reviews, but that doesn't mean to say that if I gave it 4 stars, I didn't think it was a good book and I didn't think it was worth recommending to somebody else. It's just that it wasn't one of my all-time favourites. Whereas many people will just think, yeah, I enjoyed it, 5 stars. So I think different people, as you say, have in their mind different things when they choose how many stars to give a book. It's not the be all and end all, I guess, how many stars you give it. It's difficult to work it.
Yeah, and not even just that neither, but the other portion of it is if you have an individually published author and they're in their first couple weeks, what that star rating that is given between advanced reads and the first few purchases determines how well their book does, how much Amazon pushes it. And, if they're not fortunate enough to be with a publisher, they're not in physical stores. So you're either going to be purchasing from their own stuff that they bought from Amazon, or you're going to be buying straight from Amazon. So in that case, it's very important to make sure that those go up. But in other cases, maybe not.
Yeah, yeah. And what you're saying that people who are independently published aren't in bookstores, that is true. But there's also a lot of publishers now, mine included, who focus very much on Amazon. So my publisher, Joffrey Books, doesn't distribute books to bookstores, doesn't put them in the warehousing used by libraries. It focuses solely on Amazon and getting things up the charts in Amazon, which can be a little bit frustrating because I think every author would like to go into a bookshop and be able to see their book there. But then again, there are so many books out there, it's impossible for any one bookshop to stock everything. So it is only the big hitters really that now get into bookshops in the UK anyway.
Yeah. And I feel like it is the same for the US as well. Like they're and I am very ignorant. I'm going to use that word. I'm very ignorant when it comes to other countries, but I have spoken to a couple of Australian authors and they have but maybe a handful of regular bookstores that carry something, and most of the time they're not reaching those stores. And a lot of that ends up on consignment in some sort in a small shop, which consignment is not, it's not a bad thing, but it also can be very difficult.
I don't know what you mean by consignment.
So consignment is where basically the shop purchases the books from you on the contingency that if they don't sell in a certain amount of time, you have to take them back.
Ah, right. Yes, I understand. So yeah, I would call that sale or return. So if they don't sell them, they return them to you. Yeah.
Yep. And so it's one of those situations where it's like, how long are they going to be sitting there? If they aren't purchased, then I have to take them back. If they are purchased, that's great. The store takes a percentage of that profit.
A big percentage. Then you're not,
So there's this, it's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
What was your all-time favorite read?
Oh, wow. That's difficult. All time.
And it could be more than one.
Well, the book that sticks in my mind is one that I read a few years ago now with the book group. And it was called, or is called, Mr. Two Bombs by William Coles. And you've probably never heard of it. No. And it is about a man after the Second World War, when they had the two atomic bombs, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it's a novel, but it's based on truth, that there was a man who was actually in both of those explosions and survived. And it's a novel about what happened to him. Okay. And it's not easy reading.
No, yeah.
But it is so enlightening. And it's the one book that really sticks in my mind. And so while I wouldn't recommend it for sitting on the beach and reading it, because it's not that sort of a book, I do think it's a book that people should read, because it just teaches you so much. And whenever people say to me, what book would you recommend to somebody? I always say that one, just because it deserves to be read more widely than it has been. And that's Mr. Two Bombs by William Coles.
I felt the same. And it's become a little bit more popular in U.S. English classes for our teenage high school era. And it's The Boy in the Striped Pajamas.
Ah, yes. Yeah, I've heard of that one, but I haven't read it. Yeah.
It is a heart-wrencher. It will make you hurt. And it's the same as I just told someone prior. A lot of works by Jodi Picoult touch on subjects that are hard to read, racism, death of children, etc. And while there are stories that I feel like everyone should read, I wouldn't necessarily openly say, you should go read this. Because it is one of those, like, I really want you to find it yourself and figure out if that's something that you want to read, because I don't ever want someone picking up a book just solely upon my recommendation and then it not being something that they can, like, it triggers them for whatever reason. I would feel bad. I would feel so bad. I would probably cry for them, but The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, they have a movie of it as well. And after we read it in school, it was, we watched portions of the movie. And I went back and watched it by myself and cried the entire time, because I knew what was happening, but it was just really sad.
Yeah. But we do have to learn from things like that, don't we?
Yeah, we do. That's the kicker, is we have to, history is something we need to learn from to not make the same mistakes. Okay, on to better topics before I cry. Do you have a current work in progress? And if so, can you tell us about it, and what can you tell us about?
Well, at the moment, I'm in the middle of structural edits for my third book with Joffrey Books. And it is about a 60-year-old woman who is a control freak. She likes to be very much in charge of her life, and she keeps each person in their own little compartment and dictates when she will see them and so on. And this behaviour all stems back to something that happened to her sort of 30 years ago. And she's got a boyfriend, but she only sees him once a week because she doesn't want them living together and all the hassle that goes with that. And then the house that the boyfriend is living in is flooded. He's got nowhere to live, so he turns up on her doorstep with his suitcases, needing to move in, which she doesn't particularly want, but she can't say no. And as that happens, her whole life turns upside down and goes out of control. And the book is about how she deals with that and how she goes on a journey and learns that it's okay to trust people, to let them into her life. She doesn't have to keep everybody segregated. The working title is Out of Control, but I don't know whether that will be the final title, because publishers tend to change things as they go along. So that is what I'm working on. Hopefully it will be out sometime early next year, but I don't have a date yet.
Yeah. How, do you feel like it is any necessarily different or similar to the other two you've written?
Yeah, it's a similar genre. It's aimed at women, and it's about a character who is perhaps not living their best life at the start, although they may be quite happy with it. And it's how they make themselves a better, more hopeful future by the end of it. And there's a little bit of a romance in there as well. So yeah, it's a similar genre to the other two that I've written for that publisher. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's all I have. This conversation has been a lot of fun, and I did not expect. Listen, I'm going to be looking for the thriller mystery ones.
Oh, right. So okay.
Tell us about those. Tell me what the names are for those, so I can put them in the show notes.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. So the first one is called Bedsit 3. And it's about a man. Do you know what a bedsit is? I don't know whether that is universal in America. It's like a studio. Instead of a flat, it's a studio flat where you've got your cooking, bedroom and living area all in one room. Okay.
All in one.
So we get a man moving into a rented bedsit, and he finds a box under the bed, which has got some very strange things in it belonging to the old tenants, and that starts the story off. And there is a murder in there as well. So that's Bedsit 3, and the other psychological thriller that is actually only on Kindle. The second one, Bedsit 3, is Kindle and paperback. The second one is called The Promise. And that is about a promise that was made in prison a long time ago. And it resurfaces and has to be kept. And it's not explaining it very well. There was a murder, but the wrong person went to prison for it, and it all comes to light a long time later. I'll just leave it at that. And that's called The Promise.
Without spoiling too much of it.
You can read it and find out and leave a review. Let me know what you thought.
I will. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I had a pleasure chatting with you today.
It's been lovely, Natalie. Thank you very much for having me on.